Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by none other than Daniel Bahrami. So last week, we had your brother David on here, and he nominated you. He said you would be a great kind of contrast to his very sciencey background. You've done a lot in entrepreneurship, real estate, that kind of thing. So I'm glad you've taken the time to be on here. So to give a bit of background on you, you graduated a year before your brother in 2014. You then went on to the University of Guelph to study biochemistry before your entrepreneurial ventures really took off and kind of introduced you to real estate, right? First of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I like the
yeah?
intro. I felt like I was
Uh,
like about to tee off for the Masters. It was like nice.
Thank you. Being on a ton of podcasts so far, I've done about 30 so far. I've kind of gotten used to introducing people, and it's always great to kind of talk about the different backgrounds, things like that. So starting off in PET, were there any like standout moments for you, standout classes, any experiences that really stick with you?
Ooh, I guess soccer team for sure. That was a good experience with Campoli. Um, Making this pinball machine in our grade 12 physics class with Mr. Salavati. That was like probably the most difficult project I've ever been tasked with. It was a lot of late nights and getting my dad more involved than he should have been. What else was there that was really, really cool at PET? Um, I think those two, like the soccer team was really like I think that was the most funnest where you get all the boys, you get on a school bus, you guys are going school to school, you know, you're showing your colors. I think that was probably the coolest experience in high school
Mhm.
in terms of the
Yeah.
environment.
What position did you play?
I played defense. I played left back.
Okay.
Probably not the
Very
greatest
cool.
left
Yeah.
back, but but that's where I
Well, it's
played,
one
yeah.
of one of those positions, not super flashy, but still super important nonetheless, right? Playing defense, I think, is something that's super underrated, right? And your brother actually mentioned that same pinball machine, so we have to find it somewhere. Apparently, it's lying around somewhere.
Yeah, so they kept it there. So I don't know what
Yeah.
we did, but when we did that pinball machine. So in grade 12 there was two classes for physics. There was one that was it was called Mr. Baker's physics class, which was like a famous physics class. If you passed the class, apparently you used to get a t-shirt, right? And it was a big deal. And then the year that I had to take physics for my grade 12 year, me and David actually sat next to each other in that physics class. I think I got a 70 and he got a 90. Like it was literally like two brothers sitting next to each other. The teacher at the time was Mr. Salavati. And for the year end project, what he said was, we're going to build the pinball machine, but we're going to start from the beginning of this year now until the end. And what he basically did was make us sit back, go in a group of four. We would meet up like twice a week at the end of the day and build this pinball machine. And I was thinking like, oh, like we're putting too much effort into this. And then we showed up the day, like after like the full semester where everyone brings their machines and the stuff that these people did, I'm like, it was just mind blowing the amount of time and energy that was spent into it. So
Mhm.
we did ours with like my dad loves to get his hands really dirty. He had a bunch of tools and all that. So he knows like handyman stuff. So he was very involved in the process and helped us build it. So we were there. It was mostly us just sitting there watching him. But we were there. We were there for the whole thing for the most part.
Yeah. What was it like working with your younger brother on a project?
Um, to be honest with you, I feel like the question was like, what was it like working with your dad on this project? It was a weird dynamic because when we were in that class, it was me and David sitting side by side, and he's a year younger than me, and I'm a year older. And every time we wrote an exam, I remember he'd be like, "Oh, what did you think of this? What did you think of that?" And his answer would always be right, and my answer would always be wrong. I feel like I was always the student that was nowhere near his kind of he embraced it, he enjoyed it, which was really different. I didn't, not to say that I didn't, but his was just on a different level. He's like, hey, like I love this. I enjoy this. And mine was like, hey, like, all right, let's go. Come on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Offline, we talked a little bit about, the Asian six pack, right? And David kind of mentioned that you would be able to provide a very different kind of perspective, right? So he's very much on the sciencey end, whereas you've kind of gone into the more businessy entrepreneurial side. All right. So definitely curious to hear about that. But it sounds like it didn't always start that way, right? You ended up in biochemistry at Guelph, right? How did like what was the decisions that you made to end up studying that?
So when I was in school, I didn't do the Asian six pack. I did the Persian five pack, which is the only thing I think I didn't take was data. And then I guess I took all the grade 11 university, whatever, science courses, and then I did it in grade 12. And then my dad was just very, you got to get into science, you got to be a doctor. And I think a big thing for him was you just got to challenge yourself mentally, whether or not you decide to take business or engineering or whatever it is. And in his thought process, something along the lines of engineering or biochemistry would be challenging when you go to university. Not to say that others wouldn't be, but challenging from a like almost like a puzzle perspective, if that makes sense. Like training your brain in a different way, right? So that's what I think his thought process was, and then eventually, go on to some form of either graduate school or professional school. So that's what got me into Guelph. I originally joined Guelph for life sciences, and then I think he kind of pushed me and he said, you know what, do something that's going to challenge you more. And I enjoyed math, I enjoyed organic chemistry, analytical chemistry. So getting into like biochemistry was a good kind of niche. And I already had some prerequisites. So by the time I was in second year, I transferred over and I ended up doing my honors there and that. To note, I do not remember a single thing. I do not remember
Yeah.
anything in relation to my degree now. Like if you ask me the extent of me knowing would be the amino acids on my BCAAs when I go to the gym. Like I don't remember
Yeah.
anything. All right. So
Right. Yeah. I think it's really good. You touched on more so like the process of learning, right? And the way it like engages your brain rather than the actual content, right? So you mentioned, Guelph, that's where you ended up, but were there any other schools under consideration at the time for you?
I was so worried about getting accepted. I think we spent like 2 grand on applications, which 10 years ago was a lot of money. I don't know what it is now, but I applied to like 20 schools. And I applied to schools I probably shouldn't have. I think I got, for the most part, accepted everywhere. I didn't get accepted into like the health science McMaster program. I remember that was a big deal. There was a couple of other like programs that I applied for that I didn't get accepted into. And then I don't know what it was. I had a buddy who went to Guelph who was at Pet, and then he went and he was like, "Oh, it looked like you were having a good time." And then I had a couple of other friends who were tingling with the idea. And then as I got more in detail with it, I was like, "Okay, this isn't far from home. It's about an hour and a half. It's got a good balance between a social and academic life. It seems like a good fit." And then I got in, and I just never looked back.
How would you kind of describe the culture there?
The best balance of social and academic life. Like if you like the school is very, very focused on creating a relaxed environment that's there to kind of uh um I don't know, like almost be there like in a way that's going to help you. Not so much focused on pounding you with hey, the homework, let's put it that way, but creating an environment where you're surrounded by people, like almost like a really, really big high school, if that makes sense, and then incorporating school into it. Whereas I've heard other schools haven't been the same. Like I had buddies who went to University of Toronto and it was very like, okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
school and I'm coming home. I don't have that like social life with a bunch of people there. And I don't know if that's true. I've just heard that. But whereas in Guelph, everybody's on campus, everybody's surrounding the university, to go out in terms of nightlife is not expensive, whereas Toronto might be a little bit more of a premium. So it was a good balance between a social and academic life.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard that same kind of thing. So I'm glad you had a good time there. And, one of the things that it seems like really took off for you in university was this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? How did you kind of balance, studying, biochemistry with that entrepreneurial spirit in you?
I remember it was in second year. My buddy came down. My buddy Austin came down and he was basically like, "Hey, what's going on? How are you?" We were drinking, and then it ended up being like 2:30 in the morning, and it was me, him, and his girlfriend at the time just sitting on a bed, and we were all just talking. He's like, "I'll quit my job if you quit your job, and we start something." And I was like, I don't know if you're serious. Literally, this was going into summer. So this is like April of second year. And then I remember being like, okay, if you do it, I'll do it. And I quit my job. He quit his job. And then we just started. And then he had a bigger contracting background experience. I didn't have much, to be honest with you. And long story short, we just started working together and billing it together. And word of mouth came around. And then it kind of just grew in the summers. And then yeah, it just ended up being what it was. It was just two buddies working together and growing a business together. It was probably one of the best, if not the best experiences of my life.
I'm glad to hear it was, that great experience, right? That started from kind of like a small moment, just like, hanging out with your friends, that kind of thing. It seems like you kind of even weren't even serious at the beginning, right? What was kind of the biggest like learning you had starting your own business?
Oh, biggest learning is that there's so many layers to a business that you probably wouldn't think of when you're owning a business as like a one or two man shop or one man shop. Um, when you're doing the accounting, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the quotes and sales, you're doing sometimes groundwork. You're trying to do everything, and then that is an experience on its own. And then I think the biggest experience that probably we didn't have, and he had it better after we kind of stopped working together, was delegating tasks. 'Cause I couldn't delegate probably as well as he did. Um, yeah, just knowing there's so much more to the business in terms of just not doing the job. And
Mhm.
then having the experience on that front to do everything is extremely taxing. I think arguably running a small business is probably more challenging than running a medium to larger size business just because you have to be involved in every aspect of it because you're trying to keep costs as low as possible and you don't have the ability to delegate anything.
So aside from delegating, what was something that helped you kind of like scale the business, from a bedroom idea to a full-time venture?
I think at the time the big scale was we just connected with other landscaping companies that were able to sub out work, so that was a great start. Other stuff was word of mouth and just letting people know. We would take a GoPro everywhere we went, and we would film every single job, and we would post it online. And then once you're in these like Stouffville group chats and Markham group chats, and people are talking, and all of a sudden they see your work, and the neighbors see your work, they're like, "Oh, this is a trustworthy brand. They're two young, energetic guys who want to do something. Let's give them a shot." And then the one thing I will say is the product we delivered was extremely quality. And that was
Mhm.
also a reason why like we probably didn't make as much as we did. It was because the partner that I had was just amazing at what he did. And I give him full credit for that. He was just such a perfectionist and so good at what he did. He always wanted to do it right. Customer service was just A1. And I give him credit for that because we never had really complaints. And then
Mhm.
that led to just, I think, good business is the fact that people are like, hey, like they did a good job. We trusted them. We would recommend them, especially in that
Mhm.
nature of the business.
Yeah.
Whereas, most people may look on Kijiji, find Google, read a couple reviews. These were word of mouth referrals that started
Right.
piling up, and that's what really generated the business.
Right. I think those are super powerful for sure. Even in our day-to-day life, we always, read reviews before we buy anything. It's so easy to read them on Google now, things like that. So you mentioned before that your partner had, got contracting experience, whereas you came in with relatively less experience, right? What was kind of like the learning curve for you, and like how did you kind of, figure out your way in an industry that was kind of new to you?
Oh, that's a great question. You
Yeah.
practice this, eh? Okay, so I think from less of the contracting perspective, more so I was just focused more on kind of organizing things, getting things set up. And then if I obviously had to get my hands dirty, I'd get my hands dirty and just learn, right? I think one thing I didn't get was a lot of respect from people, employees who I was working with at the time because they're like, why am I going to listen to you? And to be frank, why would you listen to me? You probably know more than me when it came to a lot of the job site stuff, right? Especially when someone's in the trades and this is what they do day in, day out. I think my
Mhm.
experience was less on the grounds work, hands on, and it was more so just organizing things and getting things prepped, right? Like even when we started, the first thing we did was we grabbed 1,000 flyers and a bunch of post bags. We went around Markham and we just started throwing them on every lamp post and every yard and everything. And then the city of Markham called us and said, "You can't do this." And then we're like, "Okay." And then my buddy was actually working with the town. He went into like they do like grass crew cleanup at the time. He was working in the summer, and they brought the poster in. They're like, "If you see this poster, you take it down and you let us know." So for the next 3 weeks, they're calling us like, "Stop putting the posters up. We're gonna find you." And I had to tell them, I'm like, "Listen, we're not putting them up anymore. We just put so many up that you're still finding the old posters that were there. Like I don't even know where we put them. They're just everywhere." So it's just kind of like discipline, groundwork, willing to do anything, go above and beyond. I know that wasn't the right scenario because it's completely illegal and I don't recommend doing it, but it's just the fact that at 4 a.m. you're willing to wake up and do whatever it takes to get a phone call. That's kind of where I think my value was just like, hey, let's make this happen. Let's go. Boom, boom, boom.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's great advice, for anyone, really trying to find a way, even if you don't know something, you can always control your effort, right? And you can learn along the way. I think that's something that is super valuable for, students, professionals, all those things, right? So, you worked on this, venture full time, up until 2022, right? What were kind of the decisions that, led you to wrap it up, if you don't mind me asking?
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know what? It was a seasonal business. So, which meant what was our season started from like end of March, April up until September, October, if you're lucky, mid-November. Some people push it to December. Kudos to them. And then the other thing was there was an opportunity in real estate I wanted to capitalize on. I always wanted to make that transition towards real estate. I didn't know when or what was going to happen. And then eventually I just decided, you know what, like, hey, I spoke with my family. My family was like, hey, you should probably make this transition at some point. This seems like a good stepping stone. Why don't you take the leap now? And it was a hard decision. Like I remember me and my buddy, I was sitting there crying, he was crying. It was like we were like, and there was still work to be done that summer. So I left on like 2 months notice. So it was a difficult scenario to grasp, but um it's life and it is what it is, Like it's one of those things.
Hmm. Yeah. What
Yeah.
what was kind of the process like, in terms of like winding down and wrapping up for you?
We both came to terms like, hey, and we basically took there was a bunch of assets. There was like trucks, trailers, dump trucks, like a bunch of stuff. We put a value on all of it, and then we split it up. And then I didn't ask for anything in relation to like the revenue base to the company or that. It was just more so like, hey, just give me half and of what we own, and then we'll go from there. And then that was
Mhm.
basically it.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of moved on.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
you talked about, always wanting to go into real estate, right? What was kind of your first step, to kind of transitioning towards real estate?
Me and my partner actually got the license at the same time. Like we were just like, oh, we're just gonna get our
Yeah.
licenses. And then as we got our licenses, my whole family's in real estate. Like our family down in the States is heavily involved in real estate. And then our family here, a bunch of realtors. We're Persian. If you don't have your real estate license, it's like you're not Persian. I don't know what it is, but so I got it, and then I just started just poking at things, learning a little bit more. I was introduced to this one company that offered fairly well training and really motivated you and pushed you. So I said, okay, you know what? This is a good opportunity. I'm going to take that. And it just kind of worked out that way.
Hmm. And then, how did you end up at Colliers, doing, industrial warehousing? Because there's different like types of real estate, right? How did you kind of find your niche and this company in specific?
Oh, the company that I was working for previously, I was a sales rep, and then I was like a regional manager. So I was managing a sales force that was calling clients and brokers in regards to development sales. And then there I was just, like I felt like I reached my peak a little bit. There wasn't much more for me. I couldn't take the next level. The next level was either someone has to die or the sales force gets bigger. And I just felt like I was at a point where, hey, like I'm not learning anymore. You know what I mean? And then what happened was I went on LinkedIn and I found the five biggest commercial brokerages like JLL, Avison Young, CB, Colliers, and Cushman were the big ones. And I reached out to all the sales reps in, well, all of them, but like to give you an example, at Colliers, I had like a spreadsheet. And
Yeah.
actually, to go backwards on this, I wasn't planning on doing this originally. What happened was David, I was like, go get a job. And he was like, yeah, da 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 da. It's my brother. He's like, go get a job, get this set up. And I was like, I'll get a job before you do. And I will get it organized and
Yeah.
everything. And he's like, no, no, you're not. I was like, okay. So I went in the backyard. I remember sitting in the backyard and just grabbing a laptop, messaging people on LinkedIn. And then I remember messaging like 200 people here. There's people I still see in the office that still haven't opened that LinkedIn message. And I downloaded a link to message everybody. And then there was this one guy out of their West office who was like, hey, sure, give me a call. And I gave him a call. And he was like, it seems like you'd be a good fit. Let me set you up with a talent acquisition manager. And then from there, we just went one, two, three, four. And then the rest is history. We ended up working at Colliers.
Hmm. So I think that tells a good story of, that brotherly competition, first of all. I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to. But also, that grit and like perseverance to, message that many people. I think it's something that kind of a lot of people go through. Me, especially too. I definitely, had that experience reaching out on LinkedIn, things like that, and it's hard, right? But I think at the end of the day, it only takes one, right? All you need is one person to kind of, take that leap of faith in you. So that's a great story about, your grit and perseverance, things like that. What's been kind of the biggest like learning point, and what's like made you successful in your position at Colliers?
Oh, at Colliers? Ooh, I
Yeah.
don't even know if I'd be considered successful. There's a lot of guys that are way more successful than I am here. Like, I don't think I've done incredibly well, to be honest with you. Like, I guess I'll say that regardless, even if someone else thinks I'm doing well. I think a lot of the guys here are just they're grinders. Like, especially being in brokerage, I think 60% of Colliers operation in Canada is brokerage, which basically means you're fully commissioned. You're basically sitting there cold calling. There's an immense amount of discipline that I've noticed at this office in this culture that I have not seen anywhere else. Like, imagine you're not getting a paycheck and you have to rely on yourself to get this paycheck. And at this point, it's not like I'm working at 9 to 5 where if I want to scroll through Instagram, I lose 15 minutes, I still get paid. If I want to scroll through Instagram on that 15 minutes, I am not getting a dollar. I just
Right.
lose that time, right?
Mhm.
And just the discipline to show up every morning, put on a suit, right? Dry clean it, wash it yourself, wake up, come to the office, sit on your desk and work from whatever it is, 8 to 5, 6 o'clock every single day. Like just that discipline alone is what kind of takes you there. And if you do it at any job, I'm sure you'll be successful. But if you do it at a job where you're non-salary based and it's fully commissioned, I mean, the only cap is yourself, right? So that's kind of, I would say, I don't even remember the
Yeah.
original question, is that's kind of the success route for most people
Mhm.
here. And it doesn't take a lot of brains. It just takes discipline and kind of grit. Exactly.
Right. So you mentioned the nature of brokerage, right? You're like cold calling people. Kind of what's the like success, factor that you need when you're cold calling someone? Because I can imagine it's quite difficult, right? What makes a good cold call?
For the call itself, it's probably the easiest part of the job. Like
Mhm.
just and people find it maybe the daunting. It's very easy to pick up a phone and just say, "Hi, how are you? Good." You have a casual conversation with guided results. It's not that difficult. I think the toughest part is the discipline and the organization, right? Like the difference I think now, especially than before, is you're building relationships. Whereas, especially now that we're B2B, whereas before it felt very transactional. Here, I don't care if you close tomorrow. I'm not pushing you for the sale. I'm here to build a relationship so that when you need something done, you can rely on a market expert to give you that information, right? So, a few things that I think define a good broker are one, a market expert. Generally, the term for a good broker is somebody that you can call and you can rely on to give you information and to guide you through a transaction that is going to be better than whoever the next person is, right? And like a good example would be someone who just calls you and says, "Hey, I got this." Super simple. I got this building at XYZ. Um, uh, can you tell me more about the market? Like, I want to know if it's a good time to, I don't know, lease the
Mhm.
building or sell the building, or if I should go into it myself or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you have to answer that question. Someone might say, "Oh, the market's doing well, the market's doing bad." Someone might be very specific, right? Someone might be able to give you very detailed information on what's happening on your road, who the other landlords are, who are the other players, what are the intentions for development down the line, what's the pipeline of new tenancies coming to your market, what are rates, what have been the and then you get into this whole conversation, and then all of a sudden this guy's like, okay, I can trust this person, right? And then you got to perform and do the job. And that's one portion of it. The big portion is you got to build a relationship over years. So, it's like you're following up once every quarter and you're almost crossing your fingers that when the opportunity comes up, you're the guy that may be there for an opinion, a value, or a pitch. So it's just a
Right.
long-term process. Sales cycle is super long. Um, yeah, and to be frank, I've only been here for just over a year and a bit, right?
Mhm.
So I'm still learning the ropes. I'm probably not the greatest guy to give the most amount of information on it.
I'm glad you touched on the idea of trust and relationship building, but do you think that kind of like instinct in, knowing where the market's going, do you think it's mostly nature, or is it something you're like God given, or is it something that you can kind of pick up along the way?
No, it's full stats. Like if it's pure demand and supply, it's pure economics. Like if, for example, the availability, like if you let's put it in simple terms, like in real estate, if there's 10 homes that are available and there's 20 people wanting the homes, right? And 20 people want to grab the 10 homes, and all of a sudden a builder comes out and says, okay, you know what, we're going to build another 20 homes. So now there's 30 homes for 20 people. All of those people who own those homes are going to fight over pricing and reduce their pricing to make sure that their home gets sold if they need it sold.
Hmm.
Similarly, the other way, if somebody needs to lease a building, it's the exact same scenario. If there's a constraint on building, or if there's no constraints on building, if there's more square footage getting built or less square footage getting built, it's very predictable to tell where the market's going, considering ceteris paribus, which basically means excluding all external factors, right? If we look at it
Hmm.
from a perspective of like like Trump tariffs, for example. That's not something that, I mean, you may be able to predict it, but I can't give you the date, what's going to happen and full market shift on that. But I can tell you that, okay, GTA wide, we're at this vacancy rate. This is the amount of available square footage. This is where the market's trending towards, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think in every occupation, it's important to be in touch with, the news, right? Stay up to date on things. How do you kind of stay up to date, especially in the real estate space?
Oh, that's a good question. Download Apple News. Highly recommend everyone does it. I know it's $17 a month, but you'll get access to Globe and Mail, Wall Street, everything you basically need to read. So in the morning, probably read 3 to 5 articles. If there's a Ren X is Real Estate News Exchange. If there's an article related to my field or just broad macroeconomics, then I'll read that as well. So that's kind of staying in touch. We do an industrial sales meeting once a week. You're communicating with brokers day to day. So, like to give you an idea, this morning was a call with another broker on a parcel of land that they have price guidance on it. Have they had any activity on it? So, just keeping up to date, meeting with economic development plans of different towns and cities. So, to give you an idea, we're working very, very closely with people along the towns and cities along the 404 corridor, which basically means Highway 404 north of 401.
Okay. Okay.
So just
Hmm.
putting, just constantly being in touch, going to broker events, showing your face, coming to the office every day in a suit is super important, and then having people communicate with you, right? So just constantly being in touch with people who are involved and news outlets that are sharing information on your field.
Do you kind of handle your own real estate portfolio on the side? And if so, like how has like your job working in real estate kind of affected your decisions in your own portfolio?
Yeah, that's been a tough one because when I bought a few condos and we've just fixed them up and we sold them and rented them and done a bunch of that, and now it's reached a point where I think I'm on my last kind of one because it's just too much time it gets taken out of your day to day, right? And the value proposition's just not there anymore relative to my day job. It takes too much time away. There was just too many nights where like me and my dad would go there at like 6, 7 o'clock and we're plastering. We're trying not to make noise. The condo boards come in like, hey, you guys can't make noise. And we're just fixing up units. So it's just like, it's too much, I think, now at this point in my life. Before I was just like grinding and trying to make it happen. Not to say that I wouldn't do it now. I would just do it in a different manner. Before I was like, we were doing everything like tiling, the flooring, painting, drywall. I'm picking up stuff in my truck, bringing it to there, and it was just so much time. And now I think my process has shifted to, just putting people in the right place and delegating things properly, whereas I wasn't
Mhm.
before.
Right. I think the market's, definitely changed too. People are more aware of, how the Toronto real estate market really works. And you touched on that transition, away from that kind of thing. Speaking on, future transitions, do you have any like further aspirations, whether it be, professionally, going back to school, maybe, traveling, volunteering, anything like that?
Definitely not going back to school anytime
Yeah.
soon. I will never go back to school for, well, I shouldn't say that. Like it might happen. I
Yeah.
don't see like looking at it now, I don't necessarily see that need anymore. There's a lot of guys at this office who probably don't have a degree. I don't know, but you don't necessarily need it per se, right? I think one of the big mistakes people actually make with school, to be honest with you, is they probably take longer amounts of school and they value school more than it's probably worth, right? I know many people with a bachelor's degree and they just put it on the resume and it's just one small component of of everything. Like work experience trumps all, and it's a given. Like once you have that work experience and you go around and you shop your work experience out into a labor force, it's like or corporations looking for labor pool, that's what's really going to tell, right?
Right.
And same with like exactly my business. It's just like you go around and you start talking to people and they can tell, oh, you know your stuff or you don't know your stuff based off of the experience that you have. Like if I bring a senior broker to a meeting and I'm in the meeting, I kind of look at him like, oh, okay, like there's a difference, right? And it's not necessarily the
Mhm.
school that made the difference, if that makes sense.
Like when you meet someone at a meeting, it's not like you're going to ask them, what school do you go to, things like that. You're going to ask them more about if they can talk intelligently about, the real estate market, things like that, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I've noticed that, the school in general is a good it's a good way to meet people and socialize and create discipline because it takes a lot of discipline to not have your parents with you in high school pushing you, giving you direction, to go to a university on your own, be surrounded by like drinking, a lifestyle, like trying to cook for yourself and do everything on your own, most likely without a car, and then go to school, compete for these grades. Like you're competing against yourself for the first time, really, and with no one around you. And some people do really, really well with it, and some people don't. And it just, I guess, is what it is. But saying that, I think creating that, like the best thing about school, aside from that, is on top of that, is the social environment, is being surrounded with people, being able to communicate. You get that in high school, but I think in university, it's a different level. And then once you're in the job force, it's very difficult because you're very restricted to your office. You've got to make efforts to make sure that you're getting out of that office alone and reaching out to other people who are a part of the community that you want to be within so that you can excel and kind of take that next step forward.
So, you talked a lot about, that resilience, that grit, to really, get something off the ground and do it for yourself, right? Would you ever consider, going back to entrepreneurship?
I think even what I'm doing right now is a form of entrepreneurship, right? Like if I don't show up and I don't work for myself, I don't make anything. Obviously, down the line, I think the entrepreneurial side of me, going back to the aspirations thing too, would be okay, maybe building out a team way down the line, and organizing things in an effective manner and being a market expert in my area where from an institutional and from a private landlord perspective becomes the person that we need to rely on every single time. So that might be kind of the long-term aspiration goal strategy. Um, and yeah, that's kind of like the direction going towards hopefully one day.
Yeah. So, adding on to that leadership bit that you mentioned, building a team, things like that. I saw you volunteer as a youth soccer coach, right? And something that's really important on this page is giving back to the community, leading the next generation, right? So, can you kind of tell us about, why it's important for you to give back to others?
I enjoyed it. Like I loved it. I still love it. Like that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest, I want to say like right now I'm not doing it. That's one of the regrets that I kind of have. I wish I stayed with it. I just enjoyed it. Like, and that's a difference where like I think it wasn't volunteering for me. I just loved seeing someone from the age of like 6 years old grow and develop by the time they're like 10, 11, 12. Like there's people, I'll go to a Longo's and they'll be like, Coach Dan. I'm like, I haven't heard that in so long. I'm like, oh yeah. I how's it going? So it's just seeing that development process is is good. Another thing I loved about it is just like working with youth in general. It just gives you that uplifting and like it makes you feel good. Like I don't know how to explain it to you, but when you're working with people who, you know, they're developing and they're getting better as a not just a soccer player, but a being, right? Like you're implementing good discipline, good structure, respect, integrity, all of these values into these kids, and you just see them grow, and you're like, oh yeah, you're a good kid now, eh? You're a little
Yeah.
troublemaker, but you're a great kid now. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear. So wrapping up, we'll ask you the same question that we asked your brother. If you could nominate, any number of pet grads to be on the podcast, who would they be?
Ooh, Adam Campbell,
Okay.
Adam Campbell, this guy, your boy AC, that's Adam Campbell. He was
Yeah.
like the most vibrant, nicest guy in high school, sorry. And he was old. I think he was like 2 years older than me or 3 years older, but he was just like always around, always such a nice guy, made everyone feel comfortable. You just wanted to be surrounded by this guy at any point you could get. Adam Campbell, I'm just trying to think if there's anyone else. Um, Pierce Spragan, he would be a very unique scenario for this. He started he finished university at the University of Ottawa. After he went to the University of Ottawa, he came back home and he started Ontario Sustainable Agriculture. He basically made a grow house off of Reeser Road and 14th, and it's a huge system. They grow bok choy, spinach. They join the farmers market. That would be a really, really cool conversation to have. And he can give you details on I don't know how he got into that. I don't know if it was like a high moment or a YouTube series, but he's killing it. He's doing absolutely well. So that'd be a really cool, like, one from Pat, went to the University of Ottawa, finished his 4 years, I think it was in business, and now is growing bok choy and lettuce.
Yeah, that's very cool. Like I mentioned before, we love to hear from, very diverse backgrounds, people who don't do that, traditional route of, becoming a doctor, engineer, things like that. So closing up now, we talked a lot about, doing whatever it takes, right? Making those calls, whether it's 4 a.m., anything like, plastering the walls, things like that, right? Do you have any like closing remarks, words of wisdom before we close?
Words of wisdom? Oh, I don't know if I have any words of wisdom. Uh, d- so actually, you know what? Yeah, like my dad is not very materialistic. And he's not very into like fine and high things. And my dad's now, I think, 66. He's turning 67, right? And I remember one time I was in the car and I was just driving with him and we were coming back. It was a late night and he took the long route and I was getting pissed. I was like, dude, I just want to get home, man. Like I want to sleep. And he's like, what do you mean? We're together. We're enjoying our time. And I just look back, now whenever I'm in the car with him, I'm like, all right, just drive, whatever. Okay. Looking back on it now, like I noticed that, being present is probably the biggest thing. Just being present and knowing that now is actually the time, not the future. You don't always have to just grind it out and just slave it out. Like, spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, enjoy it, be present, put your phone away. Like my words of wisdom, just be present if you can, because it will change your perspective on life for sure.
Mhm. That's a great, story of wisdom, especially for someone who said he didn't have any words of wisdom. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Be present were
yeah,
my words of
yeah,
wisdom. 2 words.
yeah, awesome to hear. Yeah, it's those small moments, especially with your family. I think we get so lost in being on our phones. So great to hear that insight, especially from a source so close to heart in your family. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, we know you're busy. Making those calls, closing all those deals, things like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, thank you
You
so
gotta
much.
show me these deals, man.
Yeah.
I wore the suit just for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciated hearing your perspective on entrepreneurship and real estate, those kind of things. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. Peace out.
Appreciate it, Nathan. Have a great day.